This is the Clear Money Talk podcast, offering up creative solutions for your retirement future through education, choice, transparency, and empathy. Now, your host, CEO and founder of Clear Financial Partners, Tim Clairmont, and co-host, Tyler Andrews.
Hello, hello. Welcome to Clear Money Talk. I am your host, CEO and founder of Clear Financial Partners, Tim Clairmont. And as always, I am here with Tyler Andrews.
Another Monday, another podcast, Tim.
It is another Monday, another podcast.
Yeah.
By the time you hear this, it'll probably be like mid-August or something along those lines. We're often recording a few weeks in advance. But for those of you that watch this on YouTube, you'll see that for the first time in my entire life, I'm actually sporting a mustache, which I've never done, never wanted to do, but thanks to the solidarity of supporting Tyler on his annual mustache experience for the 4th of July, I decided, you know what, I'll join you this year. So it will be gone within a week. I suspect I'll grow out my beard again, but this will be the one memoriam if you ever wanted to see what Tim looks like in a mustache. And Tyler and I are rocking the stashes together.
That's right. And for all of our loyal listeners rocking the stash, respect to you. This one's for you.
There we go.
So it's always good to be in the camera, in the limelight, recording a podcast, and we're excited to do this one like normal.
Yeah. Always bringing the enthusiasm, having a great time.
Yep.
Well, let's talk again. As always, I have no idea what the topic is.
As always,
yeah. It's, one of these days, Tyler won't know the topic either. We'll just turn over to AI, and AI will be like Siri or Alexa or whatever. Sage is actually the name of our ChatGPT source. Throw us the Clear Money Talk podcast, and then Tyler and I will both not know, and it'll be right there, and we'll roll with it that way. But
that's true.
At this point, Tyler knows, and I don't. So
yes.
What's the topic?
Are you ready for the topic
Let's
that
go.
you know nothing about?
Let's go.
Okay.
Hit me with it.
Our topic of the day is your financial plan built for two or just you?
Oh, interesting. Okay. So is your financial plan built
Is
for
your
two?
financial plan built for two
or just you?
Just you.
Oh, okay. All right. Got it. Well, that's got me thinking.
What are you thinking?
Yeah. Well, a lot of our clients, we have clients that are, of course, single. We have many clients that are married or have significant others, and they're planning together. And then we have clients that are also married, have significant others, but they also plan separately. And so I feel like each of those three scenarios, is worth consideration. With this particular question, I think it's going to apply to that second and third scenario. So whether you're married and planning together, or whether you're, together with somebody but planning separately, it's a good idea to keep that in mind. If you're single and planning to get married at some point in time, I suppose that could apply to you as well. So keeping that in mind. A lot of thoughts that come to mind off the top of my head are, joint pension choices, when you take Social Security, the implications on your significant other, and what is the survivorship situation? One of the common errors or mistakes that we see a lot of people make in their planning is they don't realize that when the first person passes away, the second person the survivor is going to experience a drop in income, which they can see that coming. They know that their Social Security, they'll lose the lower of the two Social Security numbers, and they'll keep the higher of the two. But that drop in income is going to happen, not to mention any other sources of income that may go away. But the tax bill in dollars can actually go up and usually does go up. If you have the exact same situation in place where you just drop Social Security, you get less income and you owe more in taxes, because you go from being married to single in terms of tax filing, and that results in a higher tax bill. So your net dollars are lower, and that's worth giving consideration. A lot of times we'll use life insurance to fill that gap for some clients, or at least make sure they're going to have adequate resources. So thinking through, what do you have together, assuming you both live to 100 plus and have a healthy, nice lifestyle together, versus what do you have independently, separately, if something were to happen to either of you earlier, and then what's going to be left for the survivor in that scenario. We have to think through all three of those scenarios. So anyway, that's top of my head stuff.
No, that's great. I think, when it comes to couples planning, it's not a one size fits all. And I think that, a lot of couples may share a life together, but they might not share the same retirement time frame or risk tolerance or goals as far as legacy planning are concerned. And all these things we need to give consideration to. It's not just focusing on one member of a household and the other gets avoided. It's truly a dynamic, integral experience with everybody that's involved there. And we always want to make sure we give attention to both parties when we're planning with our clients, so that way no one feels left out or Even if they don't feel left out, they are just left out. Sometimes there's one spouse that dominates the financial planning aspects of a household, and that's fine, but we also want to make sure the other spouse can understand things too, so that way if something does happen to the member of the household that was more in charge of planning things, that the other person's not so left in the dark that they don't know where to start if they're left alone to make those decisions moving forward at a certain point. So
Spot on, Tyler.
Yeah.
Those are two excellent. There are two things that you said there. There's a lot more than just two, but two things really stood out to me. One, that survivorship element of what happens to your legacy assets. Sometimes with blended families, you have children from both sides, and you want to take care of your surviving significant other, your surviving spouse. Certainly, that's usually the top priority for most of our clients. But after that, making sure that the assets go accordingly to your wishes, and there is no automatic as far as it should be equal amongst all children, or it should be equal between both sides of the family. If you have 3 kids on one side, 2 on the other, or maybe it's not equal at all. Maybe you have separate assets for one parent, separate assets for another parent because they have separate children, and you just want to create a trust for the assets to be accessible for the survivor just in case. But then there's all that whole estimate of what happens if somebody gets remarried, and then those assets that, if they're the first person who passes away, they leave the money to their spouse, the spouse gets remarried, and then all of a sudden that new spouse and their new spouse, or that surviving spouse and their new spouse, may have all of those assets that they then have access to, and then they use that, and they potentially leave it behind to their children, and the first person who passed away can essentially disinherit their own children by not having a good plan in place. So that legacy element comes to mind. There was a second thing you mentioned, and I'm spacing it right now. That does happen.
Risk tolerance, retirement timelines might be different. Just making sure that both spouses feel included and are part of the conversation. And again, like I said, usually one person in the household will be the go-to, if you will, for making the majority of financial decisions.
Yeah, that was the other big one. Yeah. And I've seen that so many times. I can't tell you how many times there's one. It's prudent to delegate responsibilities between 2 people. It makes sense. One person does some stuff, the other person does other stuff, and together you accomplish more that way. Having you both do all the same stuff might work for your household, but most households I see have a division of responsibilities, and there's no right or wrong in terms of how that division occurs. Whether it's one individual or the other individual that is the person who's responsible for handling the day-to-day finances and the long-term planning and everything else. If we encounter a couple where one person is primarily responsible for that and the other person is completely disengaged, they are not involved in the money, they don't want to be involved in the money, they rely on that other person, that is the biggest risk, where that person who's responsible for the money, if they pass away or they get incapacitated, all of a sudden that other person who hasn't wanted to have anything to do with money is now thrust into the role of figuring out what the heck to do. And on top of being just emotionally devastated by the circumstances, which is often the case, they're also completely stressed out financially because they don't know what to do about money because they haven't been involved in learning about it. So one of the things we always encourage our clients to do, look, at least once a year, our strategy session, we always have an annual strategy session with every client, but some clients will meet more often than that. But at least that minimum once a year, we really want to have both parties involved in that meeting, just to recap the basics, just to make sure that they understand what's going on, because that can be a real shocker. I remember a very specific client that we were working with, and without revealing obviously any confidentiality issues, it was a husband-wife circumstance. Unfortunately, the husband was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and was going to pass within, the news was 6 to 12 months, but he ended up being with us for almost 5 years, or I think more than 5 years, which is amazing. Testament to how healthy he was and how good of a job he did handling it. But he did pass, and he handled all the financials, and he was very much an engineer mentality with that spreadsheet kind of approach. And his spouse didn't want to have anything to do with it, but the stress in that time when he was facing, his final years was alleviated about money because he knew that we were going to be able to take care of his wife, and his wife knew that we would be there to help her too. And we made sure that we adjusted some things to what works for her, because what worked for him is not necessarily what works for her. She doesn't need to fill in his spreadsheets the same way that he did. That's not always the case. You might try to teach your spouse the way you do it, And that's not the only way to do it. You really have to figure out what works for each individual, and that can actually cause a lot of frustration and make that other spouse want to step back even further because they don't want to do it your way. And it doesn't have to be done your way. It can be, as long as it's done in a way that works. And we're educated on so many different ways of handling finances on a day-to-day basis that we can figure out what works for each party and make sure that there's a transition plan in place that if something were to happen, both individuals will be taken care of.
Yeah, well said, Tim. I had some bullet points here.
Yeah,
if
let's
we
go.
want to hit them.
Sure.
Just to continue the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So some common oversights in joint planning. Some of the common things that we see routinely between spouses, where maybe not everybody's perfectly aligned, and we can talk maybe how we typically approach handling these situations when they come up. So one partner plans to retire early, the other doesn't. So I think that one is probably one of the more common ones.
Oh, certain clients come to mind right now. Probably some of the same ones that come to your mind.
Yep.
That is such an interesting challenge.
It is.
How many more do you have? I want to give this appropriate.
Let's just two others.
Two others. Okay. Go.
Unequal income.
Okay.
Health issues or Social Security age gaps.
Okay.
As you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
And then, as we've kind of already talked about, only one spouse knows the financial map, leaving the other person potentially vulnerable to not knowing where to pick up the ball and run with it if they have to.
Yeah.
So
on that last point, just the analogy that always comes to my mind: one spouse owning or knowing the map, and the other spouse not really knowing the map. If you've ever seen the movie Grease, I loved that movie, and you have Danny, and obviously John Travolta, and he's the lead character that you're watching through the movie. But when they're racing for pinks, Kanicki, I think, is actually the one who's racing the car against the other bad guy. And they're going to race, and he hits his head, and he can't race, and he has to have a second step in, and Danny has to step in and race the car, and they're racing for pink slips. And as fun as that scene is, as well as the whole movie, frankly, if you haven't seen it, you're missing out on some solid Americana. I highly recommend you watch that movie. And if you have seen it, but it's been a while, you should watch it again anyway.
are you on the payroll for Greece?
No,
or
I'm
something?
not, but it's really a freaking good movie. Anyway, the point is who's your second? Who's going to drive the car when you hit your head? They had Danny. I mean, what a rock star of a second. That's what we do. That's what we do. You might have a phenomenal plan in place and everything else, but if you don't have a second that's going to be there to help guide your spouse if something happens to you, then that's the role many times that we fulfill for a lot of our clients.
Yeah.
So back to the top bullet.
One partner plans to retire early, the other doesn't.
Yes, that's fun. Okay, so there's more to retirement than money. We focus on the money part and make sure that the money part's taken care of. In most of our planning that we do with clients, we design things to be worst case scenario. We literally do not like to make assumptions of even realistic or conservative projections. We want to look at really, really bad projections. If everything goes to crud, are you still going to be okay? Because we want to make sure you're still going to be okay so that you're never disappointed. And then anything better than that is just gravy. And that's the way we design all of our plans. Our clear income plans that we design on a regular basis are all built that way. Well, let's pretend that you're in your late 50s or early 60s and one of you is ready to retire. You're done. In fact, you might have retired yesterday. And the other one kind of likes their job. They're not really ready to do it yet. And I show you your income plan that says, you guys are good. Worst case scenario, you could stop working right now. You're completely financially independent. It doesn't mean that other person is going to quit. See, that other person might actually really like their job. They might still identify with who they are with their job. There's a psychological effect of transitioning from running your business or being an employee or whatever. You identify a lot of times with that person that you were, and there's to some degree this trepidation surrounding, who are you after you're not working anymore, and you have to do the work to do the soul searching and the psychology to figure out, am I going to be okay with that? I will say that I have yet to have a single client in 28 years of doing this that is disappointed after they retire. Everyone who retires is like, oh my gosh, I should have done this earlier. So if you're worried or fearful or just a little nervous about taking that step, and you know that financially you're able to take the step, but it's your worry that's holding you back, talk to us, because we can get you over that worry and we can help you, guide you into that other phase of life. And haven't seen any clients disappointed as they've gone over to that next phase. Now, that being said, you may understand completely who you are from a psychological standpoint and philosophical standpoint, and you might say, you know what, this is who I am. This is what I love to do, and I want to keep doing what I do. I don't want to stop doing this. I'm 49 years old, and I'm love that I have Tyler here if something were to happen to me. Tyler's my Danny, right? He's going to step in and he's going to drive the car if something happens to me. I hit my head. But I don't intend to hit my head. I intend to live 200 years old. I'm just barely cresting the first quarter. So
Keep wearing your helmet. So that way, if you do hit your head, you're okay, man. Yeah.
So we're going to be here for a long time, and I don't expect to retire in my 60s. Even though I could retire already, I don't want to retire. I want to just keep doing this because I love doing this. I love helping people out there. So I'll be doing this for a long time. And if you're like me and you're 70 and you still love doing what you do every day, you don't have to stop working. But your spouse may not be happy that they're spending so much time alone and you're working. And so figure out how to make that work as well, and make sure happy wife, happy life, happy husband, happy life, whatever your circumstance may be. But yeah, anyway, that's what comes to mind. And a lot of times the psychology associated with it is a big part of what we do with our clients as well.
Yeah, well said. All that is well said, but I think to sum it up at the end is the psychology behind it is really what it is. It's how to align everybody to have a unified vision, goal, and how do you get there is the roadmap that we help our clients build. So the other one that what came up was unequal income, unequal health issues, or Social Security age gaps. So those are often things that we will address with clients all the time as well. Unfortunately, it's not a one-stop shop answer on how to solve those issues. It's going to be very unique to each household, and maybe you can hit on how we've seen these, how often they come up, how we've addressed them in the past. And give us some quick bullet points.
Well, yeah, the emotional experience of discussing unequal incomes versus unequal health situations are very different. And as I think of the unequal health situations, that one example I was just talking about earlier is right on point. And this does happen all the time. At least a few clients a year will have a negative surprise about something health-wise that's typically affecting one of the parties, and that health challenge might not be terminal. It might be something that's just chronically dilapidating that changes the quality of life for both individuals for a long time, because you want to be there in sickness and in health to support your partner, and yet your vision of retirement and your golden years may be shattered by the physical capability and ailments and challenges from the health of your significant other, and that can be very challenging to deal with emotionally, and it's a tough time. And then there's the times when your significant other is diagnosed with something chronic or terminal, and you don't know how long they have, and you have to do some quick last minute money planning to make sure that everything's going to work out okay. That you're gonna have a good plan in place, and we can assist in either of those circumstances very well. Don't try to do that alone. It's better to have somebody in your corner that just cares about you, that wants to make sure your guys are going to be okay. And if you don't have somebody to help you with that, it's just so much harder. This world's small. Let's just make sure that you go through such a tough time with somebody to help. As far as the unequal income circumstance, that actually happens pretty often, and if you're dealing with a combined, if you're dealing with second marriages or separate families with separate legacies, that can be complicated too. It's not wrong to have one party leaving behind, a lot of wealth to their side, and the other party not leaving behind as much wealth to their side. Fair is subjective. Fair is really about what you agree is fair with your significant other and in your plan. And I've seen all kinds of different versions of fair. But the fact is, when you own your dollars, you own your money. It's your right to vote them however you want. And if you want to vote them to leave them to your spouse, or you want to vote them to leave them to your kids, or you want to vote them to leave them to your spouse's kids, that's your vote. And you get to make that decision. But if you don't have the right plan in place and legal documentation in place to accomplish your vote when you're no longer capable of voting them because you're incapacitated or you've passed away, that money may not go where you intended it to go. And just making sure that it's going to go where you want it to go in the way that you feel like is fair in your own mind. If you own the dollars, it's your decision to decide what to do with them. And you just want to make sure that plan works and it keeps working. You got to babysit it. You got to pay attention to it, because the more complicated and less obvious FAIR is, the more important it is that you babysit that plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
Cool.
Well said. I had one other subsection, which is planning for life after one of the members of a household is no longer around, which we already hit on a few of those things, Tim. One is the survivor tax brackets, Social Security reduction, and what that looks like, and just making sure that the surviving spouse isn't overwhelmed with having to pick up the ball and run with it, especially if they're the non-financially inclined one that's been kind of leading things. So I feel like you already hit on that a little bit, but I think the biggest shock, like you mentioned earlier, is when the first member of a household passes. The survivor income goes down, taxes go up, and your spending usually doesn't change. And I think that's one of the common misconceptions I see time and again is that, oh, I'll just spend less money. I'll have less expenses. But is that truly the case? If you have a mortgage, does your mortgage magically change because there's only one person living there instead of two? Does your utilities bill change that much? How much you're heating the house or cooling the house, or how much you're spending on water and all the other? Probably not. Maybe your grocery bill might change a little bit, but fundamentally, expenses don't usually go down when there's only one member of a household remaining at that point. So,
yeah, your cost of living is going to adjust to some degree, but in many cases it doesn't drop as much as you think it's going to drop. And it's important to keep a realistic expectation on that. I will say there are some surprises that can happen with Social Security. I mean, I was just reviewing a case with a client this last week where there was, you think they're going to get the higher of the two Social Security benefits if you pass away. I mean, that's something that's said over and over and over again. But in reality, if your significant other passes away and you're still young, you're still in your early 60s or 50s, when that person passes away, when you claim your Social Security benefits, you may not get 100% of your surviving spouse's Social Security benefits. Imagine an age disparity where somebody maybe delays Social Security till 70 and then they passed and their surviving spouse is 61. The implications of them, receiving that, they're not necessarily going to get the full benefit that the surviving spouse or that the other individual had, depending on when they claim their Social Security. So you just got to pay attention to that. If you both pass 70, and you're both past 70, it's pretty clear at this point that the higher of the two sticks around, the lower of the two is going to go away. But if one of you is going to pass and the survivor is going to be in their 60s or 50s, things get more complicated. So make sure you're talking to somebody about that and have realistic expectations for the impact on your Social Security.
Yeah. I think the moral of the story with a lot of this is there's so many different aspects to true, comprehensive, holistic planning for a successful retirement. That's not just maximizing income, but it's also reducing taxes. It's also planning for your legacy. It's planning when one person passes and then there's a survivor. It's making sure you get the most out of Social Security, most out of Medicare. It's making sure that the kids or the grandkids, if those, you have wishes for those to be taken care of, all these things. And for somebody to DIY that is extremely difficult. You might be able to lean into one or two of those things and be pretty good at those things, but there's other things you aren't going to have the time or the bandwidth or the interest in truly understanding them from A to Z. And that's where people like Tim and I come in to make sure that all those gaps are not missed and that those gaps are filled and that you're not stepping into a hole when you can see the hole coming. And oftentimes, like we said, there's one member of a household who might be the DIYer and they're like, I'm going to do all this stuff. But what happens if that person passes first and then the survivor isn't a DIYer and then they have to engage a financial advisor at a very awkward, uncomfortable point in their life when they're having all this overwhelming stress and dealing with things that they've never had to deal with before. So, wouldn't you rather make that decision earlier instead of having to make it as a reactive but be proactive?
Yes. Imagine if
these are things that are just going through my head.
Yeah, no, there's one last thought, and then we can probably move on to adjust the answer on this. But imagine if Kaniki is driving that car, and Kaniki's girlfriend is the person that's there, and Kaniki passes away, and he had already identified Danny, but the girlfriend never met Danny, or maybe he hadn't even identified Danny. The girlfriend just has to go out and find a Danny to drive the car. Danny might have been cool to us because we got enough build up before the whole car chase part. But if that was the first moment when Danny walked in the door, you really going to trust him to race for pink slips with your car when you just inherited this car from your significant other and you don't even know how to drive? I mean, that's scary, and that's not the best time to do it. So, develop the relationship with your Danny beforehand, and that just makes it that much easier for them to step in if there's a situation that you need that person. So
yeah.
Anyway,
I like that analogy.
Yeah,
you're so good at that.
I'm an analogy guy. I like stories; they make sense. Ironically, my middle name is Daniel, so there you go. I can be your Danny. So let's
just the answer.
Let's move on to just the answer. I'm going to let you sum it up, Tyler. Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Topic was: is your financial plan built for two or just for you? So, Tim did most of the talking, which we all love and appreciate. And if you're not watching the video, you're just doing the listening. Oftentimes, people get Tim and our voices confused. So just so you know, that was Tim that was doing the majority of the talking on this episode. And if you're watching the video, you can obviously tell the differences between us. But Tim, you talked about really three common things that we see when it comes to planning for a household, not just for one person, making sure a plan is aligned for two people, not just one. First thing was talking about when the first person eventually passes away. Most of the times there's one person that passes away before the other. It's not usually a joint thing that happens at the same time. But when that happens, usually three things happen, and we see this all the time. Income goes down, expenses remain the same, and taxes go up. So planning for those things and making sure that you at least know that that's coming is paramount to make sure that you don't have a negative surprise. The other thing that we talked about was one partner plans to retire early, the other doesn't. We talked about some situations where we've seen this happen before, and it's going to be very unique to each party and each household, and there's no one-stop-shop answer that makes sense for anybody on how to deal with that. There's no right or wrong answer. Some people enjoy working, and that's totally fine, and they want to work until die with their boots on type of analogy, and there's people that want to retire like yesterday, and making sure that we deal with that for a household and do that proactively and prudently is something that we handle all the time, and is, again, not a one-stop layup, if you will, on how to solve that issue. The other things that we talked about were unequal income, unequal health issues, and Social Security age caps. So we see this happen all the time. It's very common where there might be unequal income between two spouses. If it's a second marriage and there's different families on either sides, the income and the assets can even be more complex. We talked about health issues, how that can create unintended complexity for planning cases. And then we talked about Social Security age gaps, and this Social Security, situational Social Security is what I refer to it all the time. And how do you maximize Social Security benefits between spouses, maybe when there's age gaps or health issues or other factors to take into account. Again, it's a very joint decision for two members of a household and how they maximize Social Security benefits. So it goes back to the theme of the podcast: is your plan built for two or just for you? Social Security is a very integral part of that, making sure the plan is built for two and not just one person. So, and then we talked about life after one person of a household passes away and what that looks like. So there's really the before and then the after part of those two things. And moral of the story is your plan built for two or just you? That's a question you're going to have to ask yourself. And if you need help answering that question, you can consult people like Tim and I that do this professionally. And as long as you find somebody that you trust and you feel good about and that you can partner with them on your financial journey, that's the most important thing here.
Spot on. I completely agree. The only thing I would summarize for the end of the Just the Answer is just
please.
There are two big things about getting things straight. One is your money, and the other is your mind. And the psychology and emotion behind these different circumstances plays a massive factor in the overall situation. And working with somebody who can help you make sure that the money part's taken care of, but also guide you through the mental and emotional shift that occurs is really key. And if you're in a situation like this, don't settle for just the answer. Listen to the whole show. I think you'll get a lot of value out of what we talked about earlier today.
Yeah, well said.
Cool.
And if it's just you, then you're just planning for yourself.
Yeah, right. In which case, we can nail it.
We can still nail that too. Or if it's like you and your dog, and you're like,
yeah.
Make sure
we can take care of your pets too.
We can make sure your pets take care.
We got plans for that. So, all right, let's move on to trivia and
let's
call it a day.
Okay, I got to laugh at this one. It's silly, but I had no idea. So it's going to be another we all learn together type of experience here with the trivia.
Great.
So
here we go.
Tim, tell me, what was the original name of Google before it was renamed in 1997?
Oh boy, Google before it was renamed.
And I have some multiple choice.
I'm going to need them. I have no freaking clue. It might, your multiple choice might trigger something for me, though. So what do you got? What are your multiple choices?
Option A is back rub. Option B is Searchly. Option C is web crawler. And option D is go fetch.
Wow. Back rub, Searchly, web crawler, and go fetch. I just back rub and go fetch sound so just redonkulous that I just can't even imagine that that's what it was. Searchly and web crawler feel realistic as far as potential names, but yeah, at the same time, like, why would you throw those in there if there wasn't one of those two? Because they just seem so ridiculous. I'm just gonna go with Searchly because that feels like something that I could see somebody throw out there, but it's not going to surprise me if it's one of the other ones. It would be really funny if it's back rub.
It's back.
No way. It's back rub.
Okay, so before becoming the tech giant we all know today, Google was originally called Backrub, a nod to how it analyzed backlinks to rank websites.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well there you go. Backrub, the beta version of Google.
So if you don't know an answer to something, just go backrub it and get your answer.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you very, very, very much for joining us on Clear Money Talk. As always, we value your minutes. We hope you got great ROI on your minutes listening to our show today or watching our show on YouTube. Yeah. And again, if you want to see the mustaches, you got to watch us on YouTube. This is probably the one episode that'll have Tim and Tyler mustached out.
That's fair.
Yeah. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. We hope to hear from you anytime. You can always reach us at 503-579-1000 or our website, clearfp.com, CLEAR, F as in Frank, P as in Peter.com. And we'd love to chat with you. If you're interested, book a clarity call for 15 minutes. We'll see if we can help you out.
Thanks for tuning in. See you in the next one.
Tim Clairmont and Tyler Andrews are investment advisor representatives offering securities and advisory services through Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera Wealth Services, LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Cetera Wealth Services, LLC exclusively provides investment products and services through its representatives. Although Cetera does not provide tax or legal advice or supervise tax, accounting, or legal services, Cetera representatives may offer these services through their independent, outside business. This information is not intended as tax or legal advice. All investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will be successful. Examples referenced are hypothetical only and do not represent the actual performance of any particular investments. Converting from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. A Roth IRA offers tax-free withdrawals on taxable contributions. To qualify for the tax-free and penalty-free withdrawal or earnings, a Roth IRA must be in place for at least 5 tax years, and the distribution must take place after age 59.5 or due to death, disability, or a first-time home purchase, up to a $10,000 lifetime maximum. Depending on state law, Roth IRA distributions may be subject to state taxes. Distributions from traditional IRAs and employer-sponsored retirement plans are taxed as ordinary income and, if taken prior to reaching age 59.5, may be subject to an additional 10% IRS tax penalty. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks and charges, and expenses of mutual funds and ETFs carefully before investing. The prospectus, which contains this and other information about the funds and ETFs, can be obtained directly from the company or from your financial professional. The prospectus should be read carefully before investing or sending money. A diversified portfolio does not assure a profit or protect against loss in a declining market. Dollar cost averaging will not guarantee a profit or protect you from loss, but may reduce your average cost per share in a fluctuating market. Investors cannot invest directly in indexes. The performance of any index is not indicative of the performance of any investment and does not take into account the effects of inflation and the fees and expenses associated with investing. Although it is possible to have guaranteed income for life with a fixed annuity, there is no assurance that this income will keep up with inflation. There is a surrender charge imposed generally during the first 5 to 7 years or during the rate guarantee period. There is a surrender charge imposed generally during the first 5 to 7 years that you own the contract. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may result in a 10% IRS tax penalty in addition to any ordinary income tax. The guarantee of the annuity is backed by the financial strength of the underlying insurance company. Investment subaccount values will fluctuate with changes in market conditions. An investment in a variable annuity annuity involves investment risk, including possible loss of principal. Variable annuities are designed for long-term investing. The contract, when redeemed, may be worth more or less than the total amount invested. Variable annuities are subject to insurance-related charges, including mortality and expense charges, administrative fees, and the expenses associated with the underlying subaccounts. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, and charges and expenses of the variable annuity carefully before investing. The prospectus contains this and other information about the variable annuity. Contact Clear Financial Partners at info@clearfp.com or 503-579-1000 to obtain a prospectus, which should be read carefully before investing or sending money. The cost and availability of life insurance depend on factors such as age, health, and the type and amount of insurance purchased. Before implementing a strategy involving life insurance, it would be prudent to make sure that you are insurable by having the policy approved. As with most financial decisions, there are expenses associated with the purchase of life insurance. Policies commonly have mortality and expense charges. In addition, if a policy is surrendered prematurely, there may be surrender charges and income tax implications. The target date of a target date fund may be a useful starting point in selecting a fund, but investors should not rely solely on the date when choosing a fund or deciding to remain invested in one. Investors should consider funds' asset allocation over the whole life of the fund. Often, target date funds invest in other mutual funds, and fees may be charged by both the target date fund and the underlying mutual funds. The principal value of these funds is not guaranteed at any time, including at the target date. Cetera does not offer any direct investments, endorsements, or advice as it relates to Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. This is for informational purposes only. Clear Financial Partners is located at 15573 Bangy Road, Suite 100, Lake Oswego, Oregon, 97035. For more information, please call us at 503-579-1000.